thank you for being here. To just kick it off, if you can just fill us in a quick couple minutes of your background and how you made your way into this world of Web3.
Went to Georgia Tech and was doing just tech stuff, consulting stuff, building apps for a long time. And I guess about 10 years ago now, I joined up at VaynerMedia as their first CTO on that side. And was there for a solid 7 or 8 years, helped really build out the social media business, worked a lot on internal applications and also like financial data and all that. So I took a pause from that, went back to consulting, and then came back to join VaynerNFT. And so from sort of the NFT side of it, I was actually more into Ethereum first, and that's kind of how I got into it back in like 2007 or so. And then was always really interested in the space, but never kind of really saw myself as someone that would jump into it full time as a role. And then kind of when NFT started to really kick up this past year, to me that was like the killer app, if you will. Right, this is the first time that we're going to have Ethereum was going to actually reach scale and it would make sense as sort of like a distributed network and like a ownership level for most people. Because obviously you had a DeFi revolution before this, DeFi summer, whatever it was called, and like you had a lot of people into that, but that wasn't super exciting to me. But now that we have like the art and the ownership and the assets and all this kind of fun utility stuff that we're doing, that was exciting to me. And so that was kind of bubbling up. Gary and AJ of the VaynerMedia side reached back out to me, seeing if I was interested in joining their new NFT venture. We chatted for a bit. I was super into it. And now I'm here, and now I'm immersed in the world.
And great to have you here. So we've got Chris's background. For the people who are here, I want to give everyone preference to ask any questions. If you've got any questions, just raise a little hand and we can put you on stage to ask your questions. If not, I can just jump into questions we source from the community. So I'll give everyone about 10 seconds or so. If you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll bring you up. Any questions from the audience so far? If not, we'll jump into some questions from the community for Chris. And just going right off of Chris's background here, one of the questions I have from the community is, is there a particular stack or chain you'd recommend starting on today if you were to start all over?
Yeah, so for me, I'm still kind of an Ethereum purist. I won't say I'm purist, that's the wrong word. So I still prefer Ethereum for NFT work. Part of that is just that's what I've known for a long time. Part of it, I think, is where a lot of the attention and focus is. And I know we'll have the new sort of the new chain rolling out, proof of stake, at some point, which should change sort of some of that and change some of the MG concerns on it. But I really think Ethereum stack is where to go. For a little more technical details, I tend to use Hardhat for kind of like debugging in the framework. I prefer that over Truffle whenever I do everything there. I think Truffle is just a bit dated at this point. So I've been using Hardhat on that side. I use, for IPF stuff, I use Pinata as a gateway. They're great, and the whole IPFS world could use a little more polish. So trying to figure out if there's a better way to do that and what I'm doing. And that's kind of the top level. I use, when I write contracts, I'll do it in Solidity. Everything else, I stick to JavaScript now on the front end side. I've done stuff, in the traditional web world across so many different stacks and languages, and just the day I've just sort of like coalesced it down and just like it's just JavaScript now. It just makes it easier for me to do, just kind of jump around different parts of things. And so yeah, that's where I start. I can give an overview of some other changes, my opinions on them if you want, but that's kind of like where I kind of focus my attention right now.
Sure, that would be great, just to give people a sense of things.
Yeah, so we've also been doing some dev stuff on Polygon, which is kind of like an L2, if you will, on the Ethereum chain. Same EVM underneath the hood, same smart contract language and Solidity, so it makes things really easy to jump back and forth. It's just that it's just much cheaper to transact on it versus on mainnet Ethereum. So that's really helpful to kind of get things going and to play around with it. I think from the NFT side, a lot of people use Polygon for a bunch of stuff. You see a lot of sort of airdrops done on Polygon and all that just because of the cost of it. We haven't really seen like a killer NFT on Polygon yet. I think, which is one of the things that we'll have to sort of monitor as the world turns and where we go. Is like, is Polygon going to be considered a hub for like blue chip quote unquote NFTs, or is it just sort of going to be always a supporting layer for Ethereum? I see a lot of devs that I'm in regular contact with use both. So they'll have their NFT, their primary one, on Ethereum, and they'll use Polygon to do a lot of sort of the transactional stuff behind the scenes. So if there's things to like add or subtract, or to like check in on, or to like, you know, do a voting and something like that, they'll work on some stuff that'll bridge between the two. So they'll do all the like transactional stuff on Polygon and the contracts there, and then when everything's sorted out, they'll kind of manually transact and push that back to the stuff on Ethereum on the contract on that side. So I'm seeing a lot of that. Obviously, there's the whole bridging aspect of it as well. That's a little more complicated, just sending like, you know, coins and Mach back and forth and all that. I've been trying to dive a bit more into Arbitrum and I'm blanking the other one right now. I'm gonna have to apologize on a few things. I have a newly dad brain right now. Optimism, yeah, Optimism and Arbitrum, the two I've been looking at, and Avalanche is in there too. I haven't dove super deep into them yet, to try to see kind of like, is that something that I think we can actually do NFT launches on? I think there's a lot of value in all three of them, and I think it's something worth exploring. But I haven't, I haven't dove super deep into any of them. What else we got? So Solana, I know, has a lot of cred on it as well. I'm a little hesitant to build on there. It's a whole new stack you have to learn. I'm not fully convinced that their model is like kind of tried and true of how a lot of the community wants to go. And there's been a lot of false starts with sort of like really just copycat NFT collections on there on the early days of it. So I'm not super sold on Solana, but it is an option, and they do have a good following. So I keep my eyes on that. Tezos is something that I've been trying to get a little more involved as well. I think really what it comes down to is they have a really strong kind of artist community on there. So it's really great from that. The scale on it isn't that great at the moment. So for a lot of stuff they do in VaynerNFT, Tezos is, we don't think it's going to support like a large volume NFT drop. But from a community standpoint and from an artist standpoint, I think there's a really cool, there's a lot of really cool stuff happening in the Tezos chain as well.
Got it. Thank you. I saw we've got a question here from Way Too Digital. If you're ready, Way Too Digital, I can bring you on. Let me just approve him or her.
Who we got behind the Way Too Digital handle today?
Let's see.
So we've worked with Way Too Digital in the past, so I'm curious to see who's going to pop up on stage with me.
Okay. Hey.
Hey there.
Hey, Chris. Hey.
No. Hey, Christine. How you doing?
Well, Chris. No, I'm not gonna throw anything weird. Like, I'm curious about what would you say is the status regarding for the brands regarding accepting crypto, like getting into the NFT space. My perception is that they are eager to jump into the metaverse, but they are having challenges in terms of getting their own wallets. I don't know, in terms of compliance, getting crypto. So, what would you say that are the pain points? What's the status of that?
Yeah, no, I think it's super valid, and it's one of the things that we spend a lot of time kind of helping and facilitating on, is getting these large corporations onboarded into the space, holding a wallet, accepting crypto in general. And I think it's definitely a difficult challenge. It comes from a compliance standpoint, comes from a legal standpoint. And then even, and so some of the brands we work with are, Fortune 50, international brands, all of this, and their marketing budgets are like large. And so even though they're pouring a bunch of money into NFTs, it's still a small percentage of their overall budget. And for that reason, they can't be overly risky with it, right? So their risk profiles generally tends to be really small. And so at that point, because there isn't fully, at least in the US, there's a little bit of ambiguity around like how the tax laws work and how all of that. And a lot of accounting teams just aren't set up to handle sort of gains and losses on a daily basis like that if they're actually holding it. And so it definitely makes it more complicated from that side, because you as an individual, or even if you're starting your own NFT project, you don't necessarily care about that too much. Like, you'll kind of have to figure that out come tax time, but it's not a big deal, right? You can figure it out. But if you have like a huge accounting team and a big P&L, and you have to do like quarterly reports and all that, especially if you're public, it makes it much more difficult to do all that, because you have to have all the infrastructure set up downstream to be able to account for it, publish it, observe it, have the controls in place for it, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Your traditional accounting team has multiple levels of approval to do any sort of transaction, especially if it's a large value. And getting that set up, that wallet structure set up on your brand has been little difficult. We've been working a bit with Coinbase on that as well, and they've been helping us out in a few spots where they actually have a dedicated team that's holding the wallet on behalf of the brand. And so in combination of the brand, our team, and Coinbase, we'll all kind of get in a phone call, we'll run through any transactions that need to happen, and then the Coinbase team will actually execute that from a Gnosis safe. So that's sort of a high level, but yeah, I think as brands get into it, understanding how they handle the actual like holding and financial aspect of it is definitely a challenge, and that's the biggest part of it. The NFT side, everyone's stoked to drop an NFT and they want to do it. It ends up kind of like that's kind of where we run into a lot of issues and see a lot of holdup is just getting the approvals from the compliance side of everything.
No, get it. So it sounds like it comes from marketing the budget. So it's something like more related to that. Their income is not gonna be there yet because it represents like a very small portion, even of the marketing budget. So it seems like unless maybe for smaller brands or someone who actually wants to like make a living out of this, it's not gonna happen soon because it's a lot of heavy lifting on their end just for us for doing something very small. So yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, it's a challenge for now. I think some of that is honestly the user experience of wallets right now. I just don't think it makes a whole. It's difficult, especially if you're not like super used to the scene, and it's just a risk thing. So I think as those get a little more evolved and a little more cleaned up, I think we'll see a lot of that. A lot more brands jump into it, and then what's going to happen is going to be like kind of a snowball effect, right? So as more and more brands get into it, they kind of have the first mover advantage. They have people, assuming they actually drop good projects, right? I think that's a big piece of it. Like you can't just go in there and drop whatever you want and expect it to work. So assuming that there are brands that are coming in, doing good projects, delivering their utility, kind of really engaging the community, I think we'll see more and more brands who were hesitant at first kind of just figure it out, right? Because they don't want to get left behind.
Awesome. Thanks for paving the road.
Thanks, all.
So, does anyone have any other questions? If not, I'll jump into some more from the community. And if you have any questions, you can just request to be a speaker. But one question that we saw constantly is, how do you break in as and start a career in this space as a developer? Given, it's not a space where you can have 50 years of experience. It's fairly new. How would you recommend, getting your start? I'd love to hear what you've got to say on that.
Yeah, and this may be a little bit of a privileged answer, but I would say just jump in and do it. The thing about kind of the Web3 world right now versus your traditional dev companies at the moment is that if you're going to like apply to like a FANG company or a larger software company, the role there is actually a bit commoditized, right? There's been 1,000 or more, 10,000 junior devs, whatever the number is, that have come through that company, that pipeline, all of that. And so there's a very specific thing that you're doing, and then as you kind of get more and more commoditized like that, it's like, all right, you need this exact level of experience, exact sort of thing, or else you're just not interested. Coming into the Web3 side of it and all of that, there's not that yet. Companies are still kind of being formed. B, there's a dearth of people that are actually doing the work right now. And so there's a lot of need for people to come in and figure all this out, come on board and all that. So I think so that's the first part, right? It's just kind of like, just try and do it. I think that you have companies like you have Consensus, for example, who's like a conglomerate, if you will, of different Web3 startups. And they have hundreds upon hundreds of roles available for all their different like spokes, the different companies that they sponsor. And you also have someone like Adapter Labs, which is building out their own chain, their own platform, all of that, who always has a bunch of roles available. So I think just like kind of getting in there, figuring out who the players are that you're interested in, and just trying to see, even just throwing a resume, if it's just junior, like, hey, I just moved into the space, I'm doing this. So I think that's step one, is figure all that out. Step two is just participate in the various communities. So I think this is something that we have right now that is a bit harder to do in kind of the traditional tech world. If you think about it, is just community and access, right? You can get into Discord as a project. You can get into Discord of companies. You can start to meet the people that are building these things. You can actually get access to a lot of folk that are like building some of the really big smart contracts right now. And that's something that you can't always get access to in sort of I'll go back to just the FANG world as a simple example, right? You can't always get access to those people pretty easily. So I think that's something that's a lot more open. It's just like be involved in the community, try and find, just be friendly, be genuine, get out there, try to meet folk. And that's really going to be the way you get in. And really, the secret to life is just like knowing people. That's really what it boils down to. So the more people you know, the more genuine you are with the friendships around that, or at least sort of like the relationships. I think the more access you'll get to different opportunities. So even if it's like, oh, a senior Solidity developer needed, et cetera, like there's only probably like 1,000 senior Solidity developers on the whole planet, right? So it's a little bit of a misnomer of like what's going on there. So get in, do that. So that would be number 2, right? Network, meet people, and be genuine about it. And the third thing is number 3 is just practice, right? You can do you can deploy contracts to like Rinkeby or any Rothstein or any of the testnets in Ethereum, and it's super easy. It doesn't cost you anything other than your time. You can get free testnet ETH and all that. It's super easy to go, and just play around. Start doing that. There's a ton of resources. The Solidity blog is really good about having everything in there. A lot of information is for free, just on the websites there, and just try it out. Just experiment with it. And there's all the different ways to go, right? You have smart contract development, so learning Solidity. You have smart contract auditing, which is like understanding how sort of the EVM works, and that's a bit more difficult and takes a lot more time. But if you don't necessarily have to write code to do that. That's more about sort of analyzing the code that people are writing, understanding sort of what the vulnerabilities are, what best practices is, trying to understand a bit more about how gas works and all of that, and understanding like cool different operations require different amounts of gas. How do we work through things and make sure things are optimized? And then you also have the world that's like using Web3.js and Ethers.js as sort of the kind of the glue, right? So you're connecting someone's phone, someone's app, someone's website to a wallet, to a provider, to which then gets access to stuff on chain. And that's its own kind of world on itself. Is that little middle layer right there? Is understanding how all that data can flow back and forth, how the different wallet signatures can work from that side. Not necessarily from like the deep like cryptography level aspect of it, of just like, what's the common practice of signing messages? How do you transport that in the back end? How do you make sure that, someone can't like hijack that and reuse your signature and all of that? So that's some of the things you can do kind of in the middle as well. And that just takes some practice as well. So it's like, all right, what's in the middle layer? So I'll pause. I think that was kind of 3 different tracks, but happy to dive into a bit more of any of those if there's sort of a deeper question on it.
Yeah, and there's 2 questions that are related to this from the community. But does anyone here currently have any questions? If so, we can bring you on stage. If not, I'll jump into these questions. To what you said there, Chris. One of the questions is around soft skills in this space, right? So once you've got the technical skills, breaking in. And so you mentioned, for example, joining a Discord, joining the community, but another popular outlet has been Twitter, and people building their brand on Twitter and getting projects that way. I'm curious, from the building your brand as a developer in this space, what else would you recommend in addition to having a Twitter presence?
So I think Twitter is definitely the start. I think we see a lot of discussion happening on there. LinkedIn actually has been a really good spot as well for discussions in the different in Ethereum and Web3 and various different sort of crypto spaces as well. So I've definitely seen that pop up a bit more, which is a little weird because like LinkedIn to me has always sort of been like the buttoned up kind of boring spot. But there's been an evolution there in the past couple of years. There's definitely a lot more communities forming on there. So I think that's a great place to go as well, is also just check out LinkedIn, follow some people on there. There's a pretty active Web3 community. That would be my other recommendation on the top of my head. I'll think if there's another one, but those definitely Twitter and LinkedIn.
And then the other relating question, and again, if anyone has a question in the room, just let us know. We'll bring you up. We're about to wrap up in 5 minutes. Is there a particular vertical you'd want to bet on, say gaming, DeFi, DEXs, to work in, given how the nature of the space changes so quickly, and what's trendy for a few months goes out of style or out of business within a couple months? So if you're a betting man and had to choose a vertical or a few verticals that would ensure a long-term career, are there any you'd recommend?
I think just honestly just get into any of them. I don't think we see sort of like DeFi going away all that much. The digital exchanges are not going to go away. I think those are a bit more established, though we still see sort of like hacks and vulnerabilities in contracts and all that all the time. So they're established in that they've been around for like a couple years, which is basically like a decade in crypto land. But I don't think they're going to go away. Obviously I'm a bit biased towards the NFT side. I really think that's where we'll see most of the adoption. I think a lot of the kind of the exchanges and all of that, the DeFi stuff will get pushed a bit to the background in some sense of it. I think you'll still have people that are just gung-ho about it all the time. Right now, like trying to do various yield farms and like staking and liquidity pools and all that is still a huge deal. It's very complicated, confusing, and if you want to dive into it and get into it, there's definitely sort of there's lots of plays you can do there just from like an arbitrage opportunity, like trying to figure out, all right, where can I just get like farm yield and like kind of make money, or how does all that work? Can I get involved in the dev of it? How does it go to maintain it? So that's all there. I mean, I would, again, I'm biased. I would still pick the NFT side. I think learning how to do this and scale it and grow it long term is really going to be fun. And I think this is going to be where a lot of opportunity is for the next kind of 10 years or so.
Got it. We have one question from someone. I'm trying to bring him on, Paul. And in the meantime, while I figure this out, for you, Chris, when you're looking at a candidate's profile or interviewing them, like, what do you look for in a candidate? Is it the amount of smart contracts they've built? Like, what would stand out to you in their portfolio?
So I guess it depends on like what I'm actually hiring for at the time. But I'm a big sort of, I mean, you phrase it as soft skills. I really hate that phrase, but I really believe in sort of the person's ability to communicate, the interactions you can have with them on a daily basis. Most of software development ends up being communication, unless you're just a single dev building your own thing. And so if you're not able to do that, if you're not a good person to work with, if you can't hit deadlines, if you're kind of like not in a person that I want to like spend a lot of time with, then that's the first mark for me. Is like, all right, how are they in that? The second, also, I try to evaluate how someone's ability to like adapt and learn is. Right. So I have learned so many different stacks, so many different frameworks, so many different things across my career. And that's just going to be important. It doesn't really matter where you start, because I guarantee you're not going to end up there later on in your career. And so really having that aptitude to figure out if you can like learn something. And it's a little bit hard to test for and all that, but I like to do a lot of collaborative interviews. So I don't do like whiteboard tests. I don't do necessarily take-home tests. I like to give a project, give someone a night to think about it, and then collaborate for an hour or two and see how they approach it, have them go through their thoughts, how they're thinking of it, this and that. A lot of dev is teaching and learning. And so if you can show an aptitude for that in some way, I think that's really, from my mind, that's kind of really what I look for first. And then the raw tech skills, it depends on the role, right? If I'm looking for someone who needs to be like a senior architect who's going to like build large systems and distributed systems and all that, then I need someone who's done that before, because it's hard. If I'm looking for someone to kind of help support on web projects, then there's a lot more flexibility because I can kind of teach as we go. So it really varies in the role. I think a lot of them is, again, about communication and sort of how you present yourself and how you work with everyone. And then another portion of it is depending on what the role is, it becomes technical.
Got it. So we've got one question here from the community, and then we'll wrap it up. So I'll bring you on to speak, New Nowhere Voice. Sorry if I'm getting your name wrong. And yeah, you can introduce yourself. So let me just bring you on stage here. And the floor is yours. So if you want to just go ask your question still. If not, I have one coming in from our Discord. And Paul from our Discord wants to know, given all the blockchain choices out there, from Polygon, layer ones, layer twos, like how do you guys, determine, okay, let's go build something on Flow? Is it on the client, or do you really do you look at growth and trends?
So we will guide the client on what to do. Really comes down to attention. And so where's the attention? And most of that is on Ethereum right now. So Ethereum, and then to a lesser extent Polygon, because it's easy, it's on OpenSea. Polygon solves some of the environmental concerns that different people have. But it really is like where the attention is. And right now that's where the most attention is, on those two chains.
Got it. So again, New Noir Voix, do you have a question? If not, we can wrap up here. But if you do, I'll just give you 10 seconds or so. We can hear you.
Kind of.
Just have a question about what do you think the biggest user experience challenges for Web3?
You're really breaking up. I couldn't hear any of that.
What do you think the biggest user experience challenge is for Web3 and like that in general?
I think the question is, what's the biggest user experience challenge, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in my mind, I really think it's the wallets. I think wallets and the digital identities right now are so far behind where they should be, considering how much time has been put into developing them. I mean, MetaMask has been around for like 6 years now, right? And there's no dig on the people working on it, all of that, but just it makes sense if you know what you're doing. But I don't think that's been solved at all, and I think that's really the biggest. It's such a core part of everything is wallets, how you set up your wallets, how you do hard storage, or hard like cold storage, hot storage, medium, whatever you want to do, using different sort of wallet addresses from the same private key. The whole aspect of just interacting with everything, understanding what you're signing when you sign it. MetaMask is really bad about kind of obfuscating what actually is happening when you sign a method on a contract. And if you can't go and look at the contract itself, it's really hard to understand what's actually happening. And so, in my mind, that is the biggest challenge, is like figuring out how do we get better wallet and digital identity experiences in the hands of everyone, so it's much more clear about what's happening, and it becomes more difficult to just like sign rogue contracts and just lose all your ETH or get everything wiped, or store too much stuff in a single hot wallet and realize like, oh wait, I did the wrong thing, now everything's gone. So that's my mind is the biggest challenge that needs to get solved.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for your time, and again, congrats on being a new dad.
Thanks.
We'll do this again at some point. I appreciate everyone for being here and being a part of the Cadena community. So thank you, everyone, and GM, good night wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you again soon. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Cool. Thanks all. Take care.